They thought I was just a decorative wife, a fading accessory to Alistair's rising star at Vanguardia Global. They believed my silence could be bought with a check. But as I stood in the ballroom shadows, watching him grip the podium to accept his title, my hand did not tremble when I pressed play. The world was about to see exactly who Alistair Sterling was when he thought no one was watching, and they were going to see it in high definition. My name is Katerina Thornfield, and for the last 7 years, I have lived inside a diamond. From the outside, the Sterling estate in the Hamptons was a marvel of flawless architecture and manicured nature. It was a place where the Atlantic Ocean crashed politely against the private beach, where the hydrangeas bloomed in a synchronized riot of blue and white, and where silence was the most expensive commodity of all, to the world. I was the lucky one. I was the investigative journalist who had snagged Alistair Sterling, the heir to the Vanguardia Global Solutions empire. I was the Cinderella who had traded her notepad and grit for silk gowns and luncheons. But diamonds are cold, hard, and capable of cutting you if you hold them the wrong way. And inside this house, the temperature was always freezing. The morning of the incident began like any other, suffocated by the heavy blanket of Sterling perfection. I sat on the terrace overlooking the cliffs, nursing a cup of Earl Grey that had gone tepid. The air smelled of salt and old money. Across the table, Beatrice Sterling, my mother-in-law, was dissecting a grapefruit with the surgical precision she usually reserved for dissecting my character. Beatrice was a woman carved from granite and wrapped in Chanel. She did not age. She simply hardened. She set down her silver spoon and looked at me, her eyes sweeping over my figure with a familiar, clinical disappointment. "You look pale, Katerina," Beatrice said, her voice smooth. "I certainly hope it is not another migraine. We have the charity gala tonight. Alistair needs you radiant. The board is watching closely." "I am fine, Beatrice," I lied, forcing a smile that felt tight on my face. "Just the weather." "The weather?" she scoffed, picking up her linen napkin. "You are always affected by something, aren't you? It has been 7 years. Katerina, 7 years of marriage. In my day, a Sterling wife understood her primary duty within the first 12 months. She did not need to say the words male heir aloud. They hung in the air between us, heavy and accusatory. The fact that my womb remained empty was treated not as a biological tragedy, but as a breach of contract. To Beatrice and her husband Conrad, I was failing to provide the essential return on their investment. "We are trying, Beatrice," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Trying is for people who cannot afford results," she countered sharply. "Alistair becomes CEO next month. He needs a legacy. He needs to project stability, virility, and future growth. A barren wife does not project growth. Katerina, it projects stagnation." She stood up, signaling the end of the conversation. I remained seated, staring at the dark ocean, feeling the familiar sting of inadequacy. I was 32 years old. I was intelligent. I had once exposed corruption in City Hall that led to 3 arrests. Yet here, I was reduced to livestock that refused to breed. Later that afternoon, the tension in the house shifted from cold judgment to frantic energy. Alistair came home early from the city, a storm cloud in a bespoke Italian suit. He was 35, handsome in a way that looked best in photographs, sharp jaw, piercing blue eyes, and a smile that he could turn on and off like a light switch. Lately, the switch had been stuck in the off position. He paced the living room, a tumbler of scotch in his hand, though it was only 2 o'clock in the afternoon. "The Asian markets are jittery," Alistair muttered, not really speaking to me but at me. "If the stock dips below $150 before the announcement, the board might hesitate. I need everything perfect tonight. Perfect." "You will be great, Alistair," I said, reaching out to touch his arm. "You have worked for this your whole life." He pulled away, checking his phone. "It is not about work, Katerina. It is about perception. Vanguardia is a family company. They need to see a strong family unit." He looked at me, his eyes narrowing. "Wear the red dress tonight, and for God's sake, try to look happy. If anyone asks about children, just smile and say, 'We are focusing on us for now.' Do not look sad. Weakness smells like blood to these people." "I never look sad in public, Alistair," I replied, masking the hurt. Just then, a burst of laughter floated down the hallway. It was bright, youthful, and entirely out of place in this mausoleum of a home. Brianna walked in, holding the hand of Alistair's 4-year-old nephew, Julian. Julian was staying with us for the summer while Alistair's sister navigated a messy divorce in Europe. Because I had no children of my own to occupy my time, the family had hired a nanny. Brianna was 24 years old. She had the kind of innocent, wide-eyed beauty that disarmed people, blonde curls, soft features, and a deference that seemed almost too practiced. But my journalist brain, dormant but not dead, had noticed things, small things. "Mr. Sterling," Brianna said, her voice dropping an octave as she looked at Alistair. "Julian drew a picture for you." She stepped closer to him than was necessary, much closer. As she handed him the drawing, her fingers lingered on his wrist for a second too long. It was a subtle gesture, one that could be dismissed as accidental, but I saw the way Alistair's posture relaxed instantly. "Thank you, Brianna," Alistair said, his voice softening. "You are doing a wonderful job with him." I watched them. I smelled it then, the faint, woodsy scent of Alistair's custom cologne. But it was not coming from him. It was drifting off Brianna. "That is a lovely bracelet." "Brianna," I said, my voice cutting through the moment. I nodded toward her wrist, where a delicate tennis bracelet glittered under the recessed lighting. "Is that new?" Brianna froze. She pulled her sleeve down quickly. "Oh, this? It is just costume jewelry. Mrs. Sterling, a knockoff I bought in the city for $20. I knew jewelry. I knew the way real diamonds refracted light versus the dull shine of cubic zirconia. That bracelet was worth at least $5,000. A nanny's salary did not cover $5,000 impulses. "It catches the light beautifully for a knockoff," I said dryly. Alistair cleared his throat, stepping between us. "Katerina, go get ready. The car leaves in 2 hours. Brianna, take Julian to the playroom." He dismissed us both. But as I turned to leave, I saw the look they exchanged. It was brief, terrifyingly intimate, and filled with a shared secret. My stomach turned, but I pushed the suspicion down. I had to be the perfect wife. I had to survive the night. The gala was a blur of flashing cameras and forced conversation. The ballroom at the Pierre Hotel was filled with the titans of New York industry. I played my role to perfection, smiling until my cheeks ached, deflecting questions about my fertility with practiced grace. But the headache started around 9 o'clock. It began as a dull throb behind my left eye and quickly escalated into a blinding spike of pain. Alistair was deep in conversation with the chairman of the board, a man named Eldridge, who looked like a fossil in a tuxedo. I touched Alistair's elbow. "I need to go," I whispered. "Migraine. I cannot see straight." Alistair looked annoyed, but he saw the pallor of my skin. "Fine. Go. Send the driver back for me. I cannot leave yet. It looks bad if we both disappear." "I will take a taxi," I said. "Keep the driver. Do not be ridiculous. Take the car. I will get a ride with my father." The ride back to the Hamptons usually took 2 hours. But at this time of night, with the roads empty, the driver made it in 90 minutes. I pressed my forehead against the cool glass. Watching the trees blur by, I felt a profound sense of loneliness. I was returning to a mansion that was not a home, leaving behind a husband who viewed me as a prop. When the car pulled up the long gravel driveway, the house was dark. The staff had likely retired to their quarters in the guest house. Brianna and Julian would be asleep in the West Wing. I thanked the driver and let myself in. The silence of the Sterling estate was heavy, like a physical weight. I slipped off my heels in the foyer, carrying them in my hand to avoid making noise on the marble floors. I just wanted to take medication and sleep for 12 hours. As I walked past the library toward the staircase, I saw it. A sliver of golden light spilling out from under the double doors of Alistair's home office. My heart stuttered. Alistair was still in the city. He had said he was staying. Had he beaten me home? Was there an intruder? I should have called out. I should have announced my presence. But the instinct that had made me a successful journalist, the instinct that told me when a politician was lying or when a story was hiding in the shadows, woke up. It screamed at me to be quiet. I crept toward the door. The thick carpet in the hallway absorbed my footsteps. The door was ajar, just an inch. I heard a sound that made my blood run cold. It was a laugh, a low, throaty laugh that belonged to a woman. And then, Alistair's voice. God, I have missed this. He was here. He had left the gala right after me. Or perhaps he had never intended to stay. I moved to the crack in the door. My hand shook. Not from fear, but from a sudden, violent clarity. I reached into my clutch and pulled out my phone. I swiped to the camera, switched it to video, and silenced the ringer. I lifted the phone to the gap in the wood. The angle was perfect. Alistair was sitting on the edge of his massive mahogany desk, his tie undone, his jacket thrown on the floor. Standing between his legs, her hands resting possessively on his chest, was Brianna. She was not wearing her nanny uniform. She was wearing a silk robe that I recognized. It was mine, a robe I had bought in Paris 3 years ago and never worn. You took a risk coming back so early, Brianna purred, running her fingers through his hair. What if the Ice Queen comes home? She is halfway to a coma by now, Alistair said, pulling her closer. She gets these migraines. She will go straight to bed and black out until noon. We have the whole house. I watched as he kissed her. It was not the polite, dry peck he gave me at parties. It was hungry, desperate. It was the kiss of a man who was in love, or at least in lust. I felt a sob rise in my throat, but I swallowed it down. I forced my hand to stay steady. I needed more. I needed the smoking gun. Adultery was one thing. In our world, adultery was solved with a settlement and a quiet divorce. I needed to know why. Brianna pulled back, looking into his eyes. I am tired of hiding, Alistair. I am tired of watching her play the lady of the manor while I watch your nephew. When is it going to be my turn? Alistair sighed, resting his forehead against hers. Soon, baby, very soon. You keep saying that, she pouted. I mean it, Alistair said, his voice dropping, becoming serious. This was it, the moment the truth stripped itself bare. Listen to me. The board votes on the 1st of the month. I need the CEO title. I need the control. And then? Brianna asked. Alistair looked her dead in the eye. The camera focused on his face, capturing every micro-expression of his disdain for me. Once I get the CEO spot next month, I will divorce Katerina. She is useless to the bloodline, but we need her face for the shareholders until then. I froze. The cruelty of the words hit me like a physical blow. Useless to the bloodline. He spoke of me as if I were a broken broodmare, a malfunctioning appliance to be discarded once the warranty expired. She has no idea? Brianna asked, tracing his jawline. None, Alistair laughed. A cold, cruel sound. She thinks it is just stress. She actually thinks I care about her health. The woman is pathetic. She will sign whatever I put in front of her just to avoid a scene. I will give her a condo in Seattle, and she will fade away. And us? And us, Alistair smiled, kissing her neck. We build the real dynasty. I stopped recording. My finger hovered over the stop button for a fraction of a second. Cementing the file. I had it. 2 minutes and 14 seconds of destruction. I stepped back from the door, my heart hammering against my ribs so hard I thought they might hear it. I turned and walked back toward the foyer. Moving faster now. I needed to get upstairs. I needed to be invisible. I reached the master bedroom and locked the door softly behind me. My legs finally gave out, and I sank onto the plush carpet, gasping for air. The room spun. The betrayal was a physical sickness in my stomach. Alistair, whom I had loved, whom I had defended, whom I had tried so hard to please, was not just cheating, he was plotting my erasure. But as I sat there in the dark, clutching my phone, something shifted. The tears that threatened to spill did not come. Instead, a cold calm washed over me. It was the same calm I felt when I was 25, sitting in a car outside a warehouse, waiting to catch a corrupt senator taking a bribe. The weeping wife died in that hallway. The journalist was back. I stood up and walked to my laptop. I did not trust the phone. I connected it with a cable, my hands moving with practiced efficiency. I uploaded the video file to a secure, encrypted cloud server I had maintained since my reporting days, a server Alistair did not know existed. I named the file project_Vanguardia .MP4. Then I made 2 copies, one on an external hard drive which I taped underneath the bottom drawer of my jewelry armoire, another on a micro SD card which I slipped inside the lining of my makeup bag. I looked at myself in the vanity mirror. My face was pale, my eyes wide. I looked like a victim. "No," I whispered to my reflection. I wiped a smudge of mascara from under my eye. I would not be the useless wife he discarded. I would be the architect of his ruin. He wanted a show for the shareholders? I would give him a show. I undressed, put on my silk pajamas, and climbed into the cold, empty bed. I lay there in the dark, listening to the distant sound of the ocean, and waited for my husband to finish with his mistress and come to bed. Unsuspecting that he was now sleeping next to his executioner, the sun rose over the Hamptons with an audacity that felt personal. It bathed the bedroom in a soft, golden light that lied about the nature of the world. I woke up precisely at 7 o'clock in the morning, my internal alarm clock functioning despite the fact that I had only slept for perhaps 90 minutes. I turned my head on the pillow and looked at Alistair. He was sleeping on his back, his mouth slightly open, one arm thrown carelessly over his eyes. He looked peaceful. He looked innocent. It was a terrifying magic trick, how a man could destroy a woman's life with a few sentences and then sleep like a baby. I got out of bed, moving with the fluidity of a ghost. I went into the bathroom and splashed ice-cold water on my face. I looked at the woman in the mirror. Her eyes were red-rimmed, but nothing that concealer and eye drops could not fix. I applied my armor, foundation, mascara, lipstick in a shade called Dusty Rose, by the time I walked downstairs. Katerina, the betrayed wife, was gone. Katerina, the Sterling trophy, was present for duty. Breakfast was a theater production. I poured Alistair his coffee. Black, no sugar. I placed the silver toast rack within his reach. When he walked in, smelling of shower gel and entitlement, I did not flinch. "Good morning," he said, barely looking up from his tablet. "How is the head?" "Better," I lied. My voice was steady. "The medicine knocked me out." "Good," he muttered. "You missed a hell of a speech from Eldridge. He rambled for 40 minutes. I am sure you were charming enough for both of us," I said. He finally looked at me, searching for cracks. I gave him a smile that did not reach my eyes, but he never looked at my eyes anyway. He only looked at the surface. "I have a meeting with the acquisition team at 10, he said, checking his watch. "I will be late tonight." "Of course," I said. "Business." I knew exactly what kind of business it was, but I sipped my tea and let him leave, as soon as the heavy front door clicked shut. The silence rushed back in, but it was different now. It was no longer empty. It was charged with electricity. I was not waiting for him anymore. I was hunting him. At 11 o'clock, I had an appointment with Dr. Evans in the city. I had booked this weeks ago. Another routine humiliation in the endless parade of fertility treatments. I almost canceled it. What was the point? But I needed to maintain the schedule. Any deviation would be suspicious. Alistair watched my calendar like a hawk, or rather, he had his assistant watch it. The clinic on the Upper East Side was sleek and smelled of antiseptic and expensive candles. "Doctor, Evans was a kind man with gray hair and a soft voice that always sounded apologetic when he gave me bad news. I lay back on the examination table, staring at the ceiling tiles, counting the little dots, 142 dots in the panel directly above me. I had counted them a dozen times before. "Okay, Katerina." "Doctor," Evans said, adjusting the ultrasound wand. "Let us take a look. You said you have been feeling a bit nauseous?" "Stress," I said. "Just stress." The room was quiet for a long moment. Usually, this was the part where he sighed and told me the lining was too thin, or the follicles were not responding. I waited for the disappointment. It was a familiar friend. "Katerina," he said, his voice strange. I lifted my head. "What is it? Is something wrong?" He turned the monitor toward me. On the black and white screen, amidst the static, there was a small, rhythmic flutter. It looked like a tiny, pulsing bean. "That, doctor," Evans said, pointing to the screen, "is a heartbeat." The air left the room. I sat up, clutching the paper gown to my chest. "That is impossible. We stopped the injections 3 months ago. You said the odds were less than 5%. Nature is a funny thing," he smiled. A genuine, beaming smile. "You are 8 weeks along. Spontaneous conception. It is a miracle. Really." I stared at the screen. A baby. The thing I had prayed for, cried for, and bargained with God for every night for 7 years. It was here, finally, here. And the father was a man who was planning to divorce me in 4 weeks because I was useless to the bloodline. A laugh bubbled up in my throat, hysterical and sharp. I clamped my hand over my mouth to stifle it. It was not a miracle. It was a joke. A cosmic, twisted joke. "Are you okay, doctor?" Evans asked, his brow furrowing. "I am happy," I choked out, tears streaming down my face. They were tears of rage, but he interpreted them as joy. "I am just overwhelmed. Please, keep this confidential for now. I want to surprise Alistair." "Of course," he said. "This is going to be quite the surprise." I walked out of the clinic onto Fifth Avenue. Dazed. The city noise was a dull roar. I placed a hand over my stomach. I carried the Sterling air. I carried the key to the kingdom. If Alistair knew, he would never divorce me. He would lock me in the gilded cage and throw away the key. He would use this child to secure his CEO spot, and then he would sideline me, turning me into nothing more than an incubator. I could not tell him, not yet. I hailed a taxi and gave the driver an address in Hell's Kitchen. It was a dive bar called the Rusty Knot. It was the kind of place where the floor was sticky at noon and the patrons did not ask questions. I was overdressed in my cashmere coat, but I did not care. I sat in a booth in the back and dialed a number I had not called in 5 years. "Miller," a gravelly voice answered on the second ring. "It is Katerina," I said. There was a pause. Well, the Duchess returns. I thought you forgot about us little people. I need a job done. Miller, fast and dirty, triple your usual rate, cash. I am listening. I need a full background check on a girl named Brianna. Last name unverified. But she works for the Sterling family. Nanny, 24 years old, blonde, claims she is from Ohio. Cheating husband? Miller guessed. He knew the genre well. Worse, I said. I think she is a plant. I will get on it. Give me 24 hours. I hung up and ordered a club soda. I sat there for an hour, watching the dust motes dance in the shaft of light from the window. I was building a wall, brick by brick. The next 24 hours were a masterclass in psychological warfare. I went home and played the doting wife. I asked Alistair about his meetings. I fixed his tie. I touched his shoulder. Every time he flinched or looked away, I filed it away as evidence. But when I asked him a simple question that evening, "Will you be home for dinner on Friday?" the mask slipped. He slammed his glass down on the counter. My God, Katerina, why are you always checking on me? It is suffocating. I just wanted to tell the chef, I said calmly. You are paranoid, he snapped, his eyes wild. You are obsessed with my schedule. You have been acting strange for weeks. Are you hormonal? Is it that time of the month? Because frankly, your mood swings are becoming a liability. I looked at him. Hormonal. If only he knew. The irony was so rich I could taste it. I am sorry. Alistair, I said, lowering my eyes. I just want to support you. Support me by giving me space, he growled, grabbing his keys. I am going to the club to blow off steam. Do not wait up. He left to be with her. I knew it, but I did not cry. I went upstairs and checked my secure email. Miller had come through. The subject line was simply, "The Nanny." I opened the attachment. It was a dossier. Brianna's last name was Miller, no relation to the PI. She was not from Ohio. She was from a small town in upstate New York. But that was not the interesting part. The interesting part was her employment history. Before coming to us, she had worked as a companionship assistant for a high-end agency in Manhattan. And then, the smoking gun. Miller had found a financial trail. Brianna's rent on her apartment in the city, which she still maintained despite living with us, was being paid by a shell company called Argos Holdings. Miller had dug deeper. Argos Holdings was a subsidiary of the Sterling Family Trust. The signatory on the checks was not Alistair. You look tired, Katerina, she observed. She always started with a critique of my appearance. It was her way of establishing dominance. I am fine, Beatrice. She took a sip of her tea, her eyes cold and reptilian. We need to discuss the future. The board is getting restless. Alistair's promotion is all but guaranteed. But there are concerns. Concerns? About the longevity of the Sterling name, she said. She placed the cup down with a delicate clink. You have been part of this family for 7 years. We have been patient. We have paid for the best doctors. But results matter. Katerina, in business, and in marriage. My hand instinctively moved to my stomach, but I stopped it. I folded my hands in my lap. I understand the pressure, I said. Do you? She leaned forward. I am not sure you do. Let me be blunt. If you do not produce a child by the end of the year, the board might suggest that Alistair needs a partner more aligned with the company's future. Someone robust, someone who can secure the legacy. It was a threat wrapped in silk. She was telling me my expiration date was approaching. She knew Brianna was working on it. She was probably waiting for the news from Brianna any day now. I looked at this woman, this matriarch, who treated human beings like breeding stock. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the scalding tea in her face. I wanted to tell her that her legacy was currently growing inside me, and she would never, ever touch it, but I forced myself to be the porcelain doll she wanted. I will keep trying, Beatrice, I said softly. I promise. See that you do, she said, dismissing me by picking up a magazine. I walked out of the solarium, my legs shaking. The realization hit me with the force of a tsunami. They viewed me as livestock, if I could not breed, to the slaughterhouse, and if I could breed, they would take the calf and slaughter the mother anyway. I stood in the hallway, surrounded by portraits of dead Sterlings. I knew then what I had to do. I could not tell Alistair about the baby. If he knew I was pregnant, he would not divorce me. He would keep me trapped in this marriage until the baby was born, and then he would find a way to take custody. He had the money, the lawyers, and the power to paint me as unstable. Beatrice would help him. They would declare me unfit. They would take my child and raise him to be a cold, heartless Sterling. The pregnancy was my only leverage, but it was also my greatest danger. It had to remain a secret. I had to hide the morning sickness. I had to hide the changing body. I had to play the game until I could burn the board down. I went to my room and stood before the mirror again. I placed both hands over my lower abdomen. You and me, I whispered to the tiny life inside me. We are going to war. I picked up my phone and texted Miller. I need everything you can find on the Sterling Family Trust loopholes, and get me the name of the best divorce lawyer who hates the Sterlings. The Cold War had begun, and they had no idea they were fighting a mother protecting her young. The scream that shattered the silence of the Sterling estate did not sound like pain. It sounded like a performance. I was in the sunroom, organizing my research on the laptop I now kept password-protected with biometric encryption. When the noise echoed off the marble walls of the foyer, it was a high-pitched, theatrical shriek, followed by a dull, heavy thud. I froze. My hands hovered over the keyboard. For a fleeting second, my instinct was to run and help. That was the old Katerina, the woman who believed in the goodness of people. But the new Katerina, the one forged in the cold fires of the last 48 hours, hesitated. I closed my laptop, slid it into my tote bag, and walked slowly toward the noise. In the grand foyer, a tableau of chaos had already formed. Brianna was lying at the bottom of the sweeping staircase, her limbs arranged in a tragic, sprawling pose that looked suspiciously like a Renaissance painting. She was clutching her stomach, her face buried in the plush Persian runner. "My baby!" she wailed, her voice loud enough to carry to the second floor. "Oh God, the baby!" Alistair was already there. He must have been just around the corner. He was on his knees beside her, his face pale, his hands hovering over her as if she were made of spun sugar. Beatrice and Conrad were rushing in from the dining room, their expressions not of shock, but of grim determination. "What happened?" Beatrice demanded, her voice cutting through Brianna's sobs. "I slipped," Brianna gasped, looking up at Alistair with wide, wet eyes. "I felt dizzy. I tried to grab the railing, but I missed. Alistair, the baby." I stood at the top of the landing, looking down. I had walked those stairs 1,000 times in heels. The carpet was thick. The railing was sturdy. You did not just slip unless you wanted to, and the mention of the baby, loud, clear, and immediate, was the script. It was the announcement. Alistair looked up and saw me. For a moment, there was guilt in his eyes, but it was quickly replaced by a hardening resolve. He looked back at Brianna. "Call the doctor," Alistair shouted to the housekeeper who had appeared, looking terrified. "Not the emergency room. Call Dr. Arrington. Tell him it is urgent." I walked down the stairs, one step at a time, my hand resting lightly on my own stomach. My baby was safe, hidden deep inside a fortress of secrets. But Brianna's baby, real or imagined, was now the weapon they would use to execute me. "Is she injured?" I asked, my voice calm. Beatrice stepped between me and the couple on the floor. She looked at me with a mixture of triumph and disdain. "She is pregnant. Katerina," Beatrice said, delivering the news like a verdict. "She is carrying Alistair's child, and unlike some, she seems quite fertile, though clearly fragile." "Pregnant," I repeated, feigning shock. "But she is the nanny." "She is the mother of the future heir," Conrad grunted, speaking for the first time. "Let us get her to the sofa. Alistair, carry her." I watched my husband scoop his mistress into his arms. He held her close, whispering reassurances into her hair. They moved as a unit. A new family formed over the wreckage of my marriage. I was left standing alone in the foyer, the outsider in my own home. The doctor arrived within 20 minutes. He was a Sterling family retainer, a man who likely signed whatever death certificates or birth announcements Beatrice placed in front of him. He spent 10 minutes in the living room with Brianna, then emerged to nod gravely at the family. "She is shaken, and there is some bruising," the doctor said. "But the fetus appears stable. She needs absolute bed rest. No stress, no agitation." "She will stay here," Alistair said instantly. "In the guest wing." "Of course," Beatrice said. Then she turned to me. "We need to talk. Katerina, in the library. Now." It was not an invitation. It was a summons to the gallows. I walked into the library, the room where I had filmed the evidence of my betrayal just nights before. The air smelled of old leather and lemon polish. Beatrice sat behind Alistair's massive desk, claiming the seat of power. Conrad stood by the window, looking out at the grounds he was desperate to protect. Alistair would not sit. He paced by the fireplace, unable to look at me. I took the chair opposite the desk. I did not slouch. I crossed my legs and folded my hands in my lap, channeling every ounce of dignity I had left. "This is an intervention," Beatrice began, placing a thick manila envelope on the mahogany surface. "I did not know I had an addiction," I said dryly. "You have an addiction to delusion," Beatrice snapped. "Let us stop pretending. Katerina, the charade is over. We know you are unhappy. We know the pressure has been difficult for you, and now the situation has changed fundamentally." "You mean because Alistair slept with the help?" I asked, looking at my husband. Alistair stopped pacing. He looked at me, his jaw tight. "It is not just about that. Katerina, it is about the future of Vanguardia. We need a bloodline. You have had 7 years. Brianna has been here for 3 months. And she is pregnant," Conrad added from the window, not turning around. "That child is a Sterling. We protect our own." "I am a Sterling," I said quietly. "I am your wife, Alistair." "You are a liability," Beatrice cut in. She pushed the envelope across the desk toward me. "We have prepared a separation agreement. It is generous. Far more generous than you deserve, considering your failure to fulfill your marital duties." I reached out and opened the envelope. Inside was a thick document titled Dissolution of Marriage and Settlement Agreement. I scanned the first page. $2 million, I read aloud. "Tax-free," Alistair said quickly. "And the condo in Seattle. It is a penthouse, Katerina, overlooking the Sound. You always said you liked the rain." "Seattle is 3,000 miles away," I said. "Exactly," Beatrice said. "We want you to have a fresh start, far away from the toxicity of New York, far away from the scandal." "Scandal?" I looked up. "I am the victim here. What scandal?" Beatrice leaned forward, her eyes narrowing into slits. "The scandal of your mental health, my dear." My blood ran cold. "Excuse me?" Beatrice pulled another document from a folder. It looked like a medical file. "We have been very concerned about you, Katerina, the migraines, the mood swings, the paranoia. Doctor Arrington has been documenting your decline for months. He is prepared to testify that you are suffering from severe emotional instability, perhaps even early-onset psychosis brought on by the stress of infertility." I stared at her. It was a lie, a complete, fabricated, monstrous lie. But Dr. Arrington was their creature. If they released this, my credibility as a journalist, as a woman, as a human being, would be incinerated. No one would believe the crazy ex-wife if she tried to tell the truth later. "This is blackmail," I whispered. "It is leverage," Conrad corrected, finally turning to face me. "Business is business. Katerina." Beatrice tapped a manicured nail on the contract. "Here are the terms. You accept the $2 million and the property. You sign a non-disclosure agreement that binds you to absolute silence regarding Alistair's private life, the company, and the family. In exchange, we keep your medical records private. We let you leave with your dignity intact. And if I refuse? Then we release the records to the press tomorrow," Beatrice said casually. "We will paint you as a hysterical, dangerous woman who had to be removed for her own safety. You will never work in media again. You will be a pariah." I looked at Alistair. "And you are okay with this? Destroying me?" Alistair looked at the floor. "I have to do what is best for the company, Katerina, and for my child." Then Beatrice delivered the blow that she intended to be the killing stroke. She smiled, a thin, cruel curving of her lips. "Face facts. Katerina, Brianna is carrying the Sterling future. You are carrying nothing but our disappointment." The words hit me in the chest. I felt a physical ache, a protective instinct to wrap my arms around my belly and scream, "I am carrying the air." But I bit the inside of my cheek until I tasted copper. If I told them now, they would tear up this contract. They would trap me. They would declare me mentally incompetent and take my baby the moment he took his first breath. I had to lose this battle to win the war. I looked down at the contract again. My eyes scanned the legalese, confidentiality, irrevocable, total silence. Then I saw the clause. The wife agrees to maintain the appearance of a happy, stable marriage until the conclusion of the Vanguardia Global CEO announcement gala on the 15th of next month. Following the gala, the wife shall depart the marital residence due to unspecified health issues. They needed me for 3 more weeks. They needed my face next to Alistair's while he accepted the crown. They thought they could buy my silence for $2 million and a threat. I let my shoulders slump. I let my lip tremble. I summoned the tears I had been holding back, but I twisted them. I made them look like tears of defeat, not rage. "You win," I whispered, my voice breaking. "I cannot fight you. I do not have the strength." "A wise choice," Beatrice said, relaxing instantly. She pushed a gold fountain pen toward me. "But I have one condition," I said, wiping my eyes. "I do not trust you to pay me after I leave. I want the $2 million transferred into an escrow account under my name immediately. Tonight, before I sign." Beatrice laughed softly. "Always the mercenary." "Very well, Alistair. Authorize the transfer." Alistair pulled out his phone and tapped away for a moment. "It is done. You will see the confirmation in your email." I checked my phone. The notification was there. $2 million pending in my secure account. It was not enough to pay for what they had done, but it was enough to fund the war chest. I picked up the pen. My hand did not shake. I signed my name, Katerina Thornfield Sterling, on the dotted line. The scratch of the nib on the paper sounded like a gunshot in the quiet room. "Excellent," Beatrice said, snatching the papers away the moment I finished. "Champagne. Conrad." Conrad moved to the bar and poured 4 glasses of vintage Dom Perignon. He did not offer one to me. He handed one to Beatrice, one to Alistair, and kept one for himself. "To the future," Conrad toasted. "To the CEO," Beatrice added. Alistair drank, looking relieved. He thought the problem was solved. He thought I was just a line item he had successfully redacted. I stood up. "If you will excuse me, I will go pack a bag. I cannot stay in the same house as her tonight. I will go to the city and return for the scheduled appearances." "Just make sure you are here for the photo op on Tuesday," Beatrice said, not looking up from her champagne. I walked out of the library. The door clicked shut behind me, sealing them in their bubble of arrogance. In the hallway, I saw her. Brianna was standing by the entrance to the living room. She was not in bed. She was leaning against the wall, wearing a silk robe, looking very much like the lady of the manor. She was not injured. She looked radiant. As I passed her, she didn't say a word. She just smiled. It was a smirk of pure, unadulterated victory. She placed a hand on her stomach and tilted her head, mocking me. She thought she had won the prize. She had no idea the prize was poisoned. I did not stop. I walked up the stairs to the master bedroom. No, his bedroom. I pulled a single leather weekender bag from the closet. I did not pack the gowns or the jewels Alistair had bought me. Those were costumes for the role I was playing. I packed my jeans, my comfortable sweaters, my passport, the hard drive with the video evidence, the folder with my medical records from the fertility clinic, the real ones proving I was sane and pregnant. I zipped the bag shut. The sound was final. I walked to the mirror one last time. I looked at my stomach, hidden beneath my sweater. I placed my hand there, feeling the warmth of the secret that would eventually burn this house to the ground. "They think they stripped me bare," I whispered to the son they did not know existed. "They think I am walking away with nothing but hush money." I looked at my reflection, and for the first time in days, I smiled. It was a sharp, dangerous smile. "We are not leaving with nothing, Leo," I whispered. "We are leaving with their reputation." I picked up the bag and walked out of the room. Leaving the door wide open, I descended the stairs, walked past the library where they were still drinking to their own cleverness, and stepped out into the cool night air. The driver was waiting. "Where to, Mrs. Sterling?" he asked. "New York City," I said. "And take the scenic route. I want to enjoy the view of the rear-view mirror. The apartment I rented in Tribeca was less of a home and more of a bunker. It was a sublet from a diplomat who was overseas for 6 months, a space of chrome, black leather, and floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over a city that never slept. I chose it for one reason: security. The building had 24-hour doormen, biometric elevator access, and a service entrance that allowed me to come and go without the paparazzi spotting me. This was my war room. My first order of business was legal counsel, but not the family lawyer who had served the Sterlings for 3 generations. I needed a shark who smelled blood in the water. I found him in Elias Thorne, a man whose reputation for dismantling prenuptial agreements was whispered about in hushed tones at every country club in Connecticut. Elias sat across from me at a glass table, reading the settlement agreement Beatrice had forced me to sign. He was a small man with eyes like polished flint. He read in silence for 10 minutes, occasionally making a small, disparaging noise in the back of his throat. "This is watertight, Mrs. Sterling," Elias said, tossing the document onto the table. "They have you bound and gagged. If you breathe a word about the affair, the pregnancy of the nanny, or the family trust, you forfeit the $2 million and the property. Furthermore, they can sue you for damages. They could bankrupt you in a week." "I do not care about the money," I said. It was a half-truth. I needed the money for Leo, but I did not care about the Sterling fortune. "You should," Elias countered. "But looking at this, your main concern is the confidentiality clause. You want to know if it holds up if they committed fraud." "They threatened me," I said carefully. "They threatened to release false medical records." "Hard to prove without a recording," Elias said, tapping his pen on the glass. "And even if you prove coercion, fighting this in court will take 5 years. They will bury you in paperwork." I looked at him. I had not told him about the baby. I had not told him about the video. Elias was a weapon, but he was a mercenary. If he knew I held a nuclear bomb, he might try to negotiate a settlement to get a quick payout. I did not want a settlement. I wanted an execution. "I am not asking you to fight it in court, Elias," I said. "I am asking you to prepare a defense for when I breach it, because I am going to breach it." Elias stopped tapping his pen. A slow smile spread across his face. "Now you have my attention." Once Elias left, I turned to the real work. I sat in the darkened living room and opened the encrypted file on my laptop. Project_Vanguardia .MP4. I had watched the video of Alistair and Brianna a dozen times, but always with the eyes of a betrayed wife. I had focused on the hands, the kisses, the cruelty of his words about our marriage. But tonight, I watched it with the eyes of an investigative journalist. I put on noise-canceling headphones and turned the volume up to maximum. I needed to hear the background noise. I needed to hear what he said between the kisses. At the 1-minute mark, Alistair pulled away from Brianna. I had missed this part before because I had been crying. He walked over to his desk and picked up a crystal decanter. "The old man is clueless," Alistair said on the recording. His voice was clear. "Eldridge thinks Vanguardia is about legacy. He is a senile fossil. He has no idea what is coming." "What is coming?" Brianna asked, her voice muffled as she adjusted her robe. "Liquidation," Alistair laughed. It was a sound devoid of humanity. "The moment I get that CEO title, I am carving the company up like a Thanksgiving turkey. I have already lined up a private equity firm in Zurich. We are selling the robotics division. We are selling the patents. I am going to strip the assets, take the cash, and let the shell company collapse. By the time the board realizes what happened, I will be a billionaire and the company will be dust." I hit pause. My heart was hammering against my ribs. This was it. The infidelity was a moral failing, but in the world of high finance, morals were flexible. The board might forgive him for cheating on his wife. They might even forgive him for impregnating the nanny. But this was treason. Alistair was planning to dismantle the company that his grandfather had built. He was planning to defraud the shareholders, destroy thousands of jobs, and deceive the very board members who were about to elect him. If I released a video of him sleeping with the nanny, I was a scorned woman. If I released a video of him admitting to corporate sabotage, I was a whistleblower. I was the savior of Vanguardia. I needed help. I could not pull this off alone. I needed someone who could bypass the security of a high-profile event. Someone who could hack a system that was designed to be impenetrable. I called Samantha. Samantha and I had gone to journalism school together. While I had pursued the path of investigative reporting, Samantha had pivoted into cybersecurity. She now ran a boutique firm that tested security systems for banks. She was brilliant, chaotic, and the only person in the world I trusted completely. She arrived at my apartment an hour later, wearing a leather jacket and carrying a bag of bagels. I showed her the video. I watched her face as she listened to Alistair's plan. When it was over, she let out a low whistle. "He is not just a scumbag," Samantha said. "He is a Bond villain. Selling the robotics division? That is the heart of the company." "I need to play this video," I said. "Not on the internet. If I leak it to a blog, they will claim it is a deep fake. They will spin it. I need to play it somewhere they cannot deny it, somewhere they cannot look away." "The gala," Samantha said. It was not a question. "The gala," I confirmed. "Next week, he is giving his acceptance speech. The entire board will be there. The press. The investors. I want to hijack the feed." Samantha opened her laptop and started typing furiously. "The Pierre Hotel uses a localized AV system for their ballroom events, usually hardwired, but they have a wireless bridge for the teleprompters. If I can get into the room, I can find a port, but the security will be tight. CAT, Secret Service level." "I can get you in," I said. "I am still the wife. I have an allotment of guest passes for the staff. I will list you as part of the event coordination team." "It is risky," Samantha said, looking at me. "If they catch us, we go to jail. Hacking a private event is a felony." "If we succeed, he goes to jail," I countered. "He is admitting to securities fraud on tape. We are exposing a crime." Samantha looked at the screen, then at me. She grinned. "I always hated that guy. Let us burn him down." The days leading up to the gala were a blur of nausea and acting. The happy wife clause in my contract meant I had to attend 3 major functions with Alistair. It was a torture designed by Dante. On Tuesday night, we attended a fundraiser for the Metropolitan Museum. I wore a silver gown that hid the slight bloat of my stomach. Alistair wore his tuxedo and his best fake smile. The cameras flashed as we walked the red carpet. He placed his hand on the small of my back, a gesture that used to make me feel safe, but now made my skin crawl. "Smile, darling," he whispered through his teeth as a photographer shouted our names. "You look like you are at a funeral." "I am," I whispered back. "Yours?" He laughed, thinking I was making a joke. The press ate it up. The golden couple. The headlines would read the next day. Sterling strength. The irony was so thick I could almost taste it. Halfway through the dinner, the smell of the truffled risotto hit me. My stomach lurched. The morning sickness was getting worse, and it was not limiting itself to the morning. "Excuse me," I said, standing up abruptly. I barely made it to the ladies' room before I was sick. I locked myself in the furthest stall, kneeling on the cold tiles, trying to breathe through the waves of nausea. I flushed the toilet and sat back, wiping my forehead with a damp tissue. The door to the restroom opened. I heard the click of heels on the marble. "I know you are in here." "Katerina." It was Brianna. Of course she was here. She was the assistant now, hovering in the background, watching her investment. I stayed silent, hoping she would leave. "I saw you run out," Brianna said. She sounded amused. "Alistair says you're drinking too much. He says you are trying to drown your sorrows. It is pathetic." "Really?" I stood up and unlocked the stall door. I walked to the sinks and began to wash my hands. Brianna was leaning against the towel dispenser, wearing a black cocktail dress that was far too expensive for a payroll employee. She looked me up and down, her eyes landing on my stomach. "You are putting on weight," she noted cruelly. "Comfort eating? Or just the bloat of a middle-aged woman who lost? I looked at her in the mirror. She was young, beautiful, and utterly hollow. She thought she was the winner. She thought she was carrying the only Sterling heir. She had no idea that I was carrying her child's older brother. "Be careful, Brianna," I said, my voice steady. "The higher you climb, the harder the fall, and Alistair has a history of discarding things he no longer needs." "He loves me," she spat back, her composure slipping for a second. "And he loves our baby. We are going to be a real family. Once you are gone, no one will even remember your name." "Enjoy the night," I said, drying my hands. "It is a long way down." I walked out before she could reply. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the effort of not slapping her. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place 2 days before the gala. I needed to know if Alistair intended to honor the financial agreement. I had the $2 million, but I needed to know his long-term plan. Was he going to leave me alone, or was he going to come after me? I still had a key to the estate. I drove out to the Hamptons on a Thursday morning when I knew he was in the city and the staff were changing shifts. I let myself into the garage. His vintage Porsche was under the cover. It was his pride and joy. The car he drove when he wanted to feel powerful. He would definitely drive it to the gala. I slid underneath the chassis. Miller, the private investigator, had given me a magnetic listening device. It was small, black, and powerful. I stuck it to the metal frame. Just behind the rear bumper, I activated the receiver on my phone and drove back to the city. That evening, the app on my phone chimed. Vehicle in motion. I put on my headphones. The audio was filled with the roar of the engine. And then, the sound of Alistair's voice. He was on the phone. "Yes, Mother. I know the agreement is signed." Alistair shouted over the engine noise. "But listen to me. Once I am CEO, once the power is in my hands, I am going to renegotiate." "You cannot renegotiate a signed contract." Beatrice's voice crackled through the speakers. "Watch me," Alistair said. "I will cut her settlement in half. I will claim she breached the NDA. I will tie her up in litigation until she begs for mercy. She won't fight back. She is weak. I want that money back in the trust." "And if she fights?" "Then we destroy her," Alistair said calmly. "We release the medical files. We ruin her. I want her crawling, Mother. I want her to have nothing." I took the headphones off. The silence in my apartment was deafening. Any lingering doubt I had, any small flicker of mercy for the man I had once married, was extinguished. He did not just want to leave me. He wanted to annihilate me. He wanted to take the bread out of my mouth and the reputation from my name. He would absolutely come after my child if he knew. Walking away was not an option. If I took the money and ran to Seattle, he would hunt me down. He would use his billions to make my life a living hell. The only way to be safe, the only way to protect Leo, was to strip him of his power. I had to take away his money, his reputation, and his crown. I picked up my phone and called Samantha. "Is the program ready?" I asked. "Ready and loaded," Samantha replied. "I have the bypass code. We just need to get into the booth." "We will," I said. "Tuesday night, the Ides of March for Alistair Sterling." "You sound different, Kat," Samantha said. "I am different," I replied. I stood up and walked to the window. The city lights glittered below me, cold and indifferent. I touched the glass. "He thinks he is going to a coronation," I whispered to the reflection of the city. "But he is walking to his own funeral." The preparation was complete. The trap was set. Now, all I had to do was wear the red dress and watch him burn. The Pierre Hotel ballroom was not just a room. It was a cathedral to capitalism. Crystal chandeliers, each the size of a small car, hung from the frescoed ceiling, dripping light onto the 300 guests below. The air smelled of expensive perfume, lilies, and the distinct metallic scent of power. It was the night of the Vanguardia Global Gala, the night the Sterling Empire would officially crown its new king. I stood in front of the full-length mirror in the bridal suite they had reserved for us. smoothing the fabric of my dress. Alistair had asked me to wear red, a color he associated with the company brand. I had obeyed, but not in the way he intended. The dress was a weapon. It was a custom Alexander McQueen, a deep, violent crimson that looked like spilled wine or fresh arterial blood depending on the light. It was structured, sharp-edged, and left my shoulders bare. It was not the dress of a submissive wife. It was the armor of a warrior queen. Alistair walked in from the bathroom, adjusting his bow tie. He stopped when he saw me. For a second, his arrogance faltered. "You look intense," he said, frowning slightly. "I thought you wanted me to stand out," I replied, turning to face him. My voice was cool, detached. "I did," he said, recovering his composure. He walked over and placed his hands on my shoulders. His touch burned. "Just remember the script. Katerina, smile, nod, look adoring. Tonight is the finish line. After this, you can go to Seattle and never wear a gown again." "Smile," I repeated. "Nod, adore." He leaned in close, his breath smelling of mint and scotch. "It is almost over, darling. Just get through the next 3 hours. Oh, Alistair," I thought as he turned away to check his hair in the mirror. "You have no idea." We descended the grand staircase into the ballroom. The flashbulbs erupted like a thunderstorm. I linked my arm through his, my fingers gripping his bicep tight enough to leave bruises, though he likely mistook it for affection. We moved through the crowd like sharks in a reef. The room was filled with the elite of New York, bankers, politicians, tech moguls. They all turned to look at the golden couple. I saw the envy in the women's eyes and the calculation in the men's. They saw a dynasty. I saw a crime scene waiting to happen. Beatrice and Conrad were holding court near the center of the room, surrounded by sycophants. Beatrice wore emerald green, a color that made her look like a poisonous reptile. When she saw us, her eyes flicked to my waist, checking for any sign of a bump, then up to my face, checking for any sign of rebellion. "Katerina," she said, offering a cold cheek, "that dress is bold. Go big or go home." "Beatrice," I said with a smile that was all teeth. Behind her, hovering near a pillar with a clipboard, was Brianna. She was dressed in a severe black suit, playing the role of the humble executive assistant. But I saw the diamond tennis bracelet on her wrist, the one I had called out weeks ago. She caught my eye and gave a small, smug nod. She was watching her future unfold. She thought she was the queen in waiting. I excused myself from the family circle, claiming I needed to greet some old friends. I moved through the crowd, scanning the periphery. My eyes found the AV booth, a raised platform at the back of the room shrouded in black curtains. Standing near the entrance, wearing a headset and a severe catering uniform, was Samantha. She looked efficient, invisible, and terrifyingly competent. She caught my gaze across the room and gave a microscopic adjustment of her glasses. She was in. The payload was loaded. I turned my attention to the target, Eldridge, the chairman of the board, the senile fossil Alistair planned to betray. He was standing near the bar, looking frail but dignified, sipping a martini. "Mr. Chairman," I said, approaching him with warmth. "It is so good to see you." "Katerina!" Eldridge's face lit up. He had always liked me. "You look stunning, my dear. Truly stunning. Is Alistair treating you well?" "He is very focused," I said, lowering my voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "He has such ambitious plans for the company. He talks about them all the time." "Does he?" Eldridge chuckled. "That is good. We need vision." "Oh, yes," I said, leaning in closer. "He is so passionate about the new direction, although, I admit, some of it goes over my head. He talks about shedding the dead weight and selling off the past to build the future. I suppose that is just modern business, isn't it? Even the robotics division. He says it is sentimental to keep it." Eldridge stopped smiling. His hand tightened on his glass. "Robotics? but that is the core of our heritage. My father built that division. Oh, I am sure I misunderstood, I said quickly, feigning embarrassment. I am just a journalist, not a businessman, but he is so determined. He says sentimentality is an anchor. I saw the shadow cross Eldridge's face. The seed was planted. He would be listening to Alistair's speech with a different ear now. He would be looking for the knife. I moved away before he could ask more. The adrenaline was coursing through my veins, making my hands tremble. I grabbed a glass of sparkling water from a passing waiter. Champagne, madam, the waiter offered. No, just water, I said. I took a sip. Trying to calm my stomach, a sudden sharp cramp seized my lower abdomen. I froze. Fear, cold and absolute, washed over me. Not now. I prayed. Please, Leo, not now. Stay with me. I breathed through the pain, counting to 10. It passed. It was just stress. Just the baby reminding me what was at stake. I looked up and saw Beatrice watching me. She was staring at the water glass in my hand. Her eyes narrowed. She was suspicious. She knew I usually drank wine at these events. If she put two and two together, if she realized I was pregnant before the video played, she might try to stop the speech. She might pull the fire alarm. She might do anything to protect the asset. I raised the glass to her in a mock toast and took a long sip. Let her wonder. I thought, in 10 minutes, it won't matter. The lights in the ballroom dimmed. The murmur of conversation died down. A spotlight hit the stage, illuminating the podium adorned with the Vanguardia logo, a golden eagle soaring upward, the current CEO, a man named Marcus, who was retiring to a private island, walked to the microphone. He began a speech that was long, tedious, and filled with corporate buzzwords. Synergy, paradigm shift, legacy. I stood near the front, next to Alistair. He was vibrating with energy. He kept adjusting his cuffs, checking his watch. He was ready to ascend. And now, Marcus said, his voice booming through the speakers, it is my honor to introduce the future of Vanguardia, a man who embodies our values of integrity, loyalty, and family, my successor, Alistair Sterling. The applause was thunderous. It was a wave of sound that crashed against the stage. Alistair squeezed my hand, hard, painful, and then let go. He bounded up the stairs. Taking the stage 2 steps at a time, he looked perfect. The lights caught his hair, his smile, his bespoke suit. He looked like a god. I watched him from the shadows. I saw Brianna clapping enthusiastically near the back. I saw Beatrice beaming with pride. Alistair gripped the podium. He waited for the applause to die down. He looked out at the sea of faces, his face a mask of humble gratitude. Thank you, he said, his voice deep and resonant. Thank you, Marcus. Thank you to the board, to our shareholders, and to my family. He paused for effect. Integrity, family, loyalty, Alistair continued. These are not just words to us. They are the pillars of Vanguardia. They are the foundation upon which my grandfather built this company. And they are the principles that will guide me as I lead us into a new era. I looked back at the AV booth. Samantha was there. She was looking at me. I gave a single, imperceptible nod. It was time. Samantha's fingers flew across her keyboard. On the massive 4K screen behind Alistair, the Golden Eagle logo flickered. It distorted, pixels tearing apart like burning paper. Alistair didn't notice. He was still speaking. We stand on the precipice of greatness. We are a company that values its people above all else. The audio from the speakers suddenly changed. The smooth, rehearsed baritone of Alistair's speech was cut over by a harsh, crackling static. And then, a voice boomed out, a voice that was undeniably Alistair's, but stripped of the polish. The old man is clueless. Eldridge thinks Vanguardia is about legacy. He is a senile fossil. The room went deathly silent. The silence was heavier than the applause had been. It was a vacuum. Alistair faltered. He stopped speaking, a confused frown creasing his forehead. He tapped the microphone. Is the sound working? But the audio continued, louder now, filling every corner of the ballroom. The moment I get that CEO title, I am carving the company up like a Thanksgiving turkey. A gasp rippled through the crowd. Alistair turned around. Looking at the screen behind him, the image resolved. It was no longer the logo. It was the high-definition footage of Alistair sitting on his desk. And between his legs, clearly visible, was Brianna. The intimacy was shocking. The visual of the nanny running her hands through the future CEO's hair was a hammer blow to the gathered elite, but it was the words that were the guillotine. I am going to strip the assets, take the cash, and let the shell company collapse. By the time the board realizes what happened, I will be a billionaire and the company will be dust. Alistair froze. He looked like a statue. He stared at his own image, at the betrayal he had spoken in the privacy of his home, now broadcast to the people he planned to rob. Then, the video cut to the close-up of his face, the face that was currently staring in horror at the screen. Once I get the CEO spot next month, I will divorce Katerina. She is useless to the bloodline, but we need her face for the shareholders until then. The camera on the screen captured his cruel laugh. In the ballroom, Beatrice screamed. It was a raw, primal sound. Cut it! Cut the feed! Someone turn it off! She was frantically waving at the security guards, at the technicians, at anyone who would listen, but the system was locked. Samantha had done her job. The video was looping. I stood in the center of the chaos. The crowd was parting around me, giving me space, staring at me with a mixture of horror and awe. Alistair turned back to the audience. His face was gray. He looked at Eldridge, who was standing up, his face purple with rage. He looked at his parents, who were frozen in shock. And then, he looked at me, our eyes locked. At that moment, he saw it. He saw the journalist he had forgotten. He saw the wife he had underestimated. He saw the executioner. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't make a scene. I simply raised my glass of sparkling water to him. A toast to his ruin. The video continued to play, the sound of his betrayal echoing off the crystal chandeliers. She is pathetic. She will sign whatever I put in front of her. I set the glass down on a passing tray. I smoothed my red dress, and as the room erupted into shouting and chaos, as the reporters broke through the security line to get the shot of the century, I turned my back on Alistair Sterling and began to walk toward the exit. The sound of a reputation dying is louder than any applause. It is a cacophony of gasps, of shattering glass, of whispers rising into a roar like a sudden squall over the Atlantic. I stood there, the stem of the crystal glass cool against my fingertips, watching the architecture of my husband's life collapse in real time. The massive screen behind him, which moments ago had displayed the golden eagle of Vanguardia, was now a window into the darkest corner of his soul. The resolution was unforgiving. Every pixel of the 4K display was dedicated to showing the sweat on Alistair's forehead as he leaned over his desk, the loosened tie around his neck, and the way his hands gripped the hips of the woman who was supposed to be watching his nephew. But it was the audio that turned the room from a gala into a crime scene. The speakers in the Pierre Hotel ballroom were designed for symphonies, for opera singers, for clarity. They projected Alistair's voice with a terrifying fidelity. "This company is a sinking ship," the recorded Alistair boomed, his voice echoing off the gilded molding. "The chairman is a senile fossil. I will strip the assets and run." The words hung in the air, heavy and toxic. I watched Eldridge, the chairman. He was standing in the front row, a few feet from the stage. He had been smiling only seconds ago, the proud mentor watching his protégé ascend. Now, his face was draining of color, turning a sickly, mottled gray before flushing a deep, violent purple. He did not look at the screen. He looked at the man on stage, the man he had treated like a son, the man who had just called him a fossil to be discarded. Alistair was frozen. It was a paralysis born of total cognitive dissonance. He stood behind the podium, his mouth slightly open, his hands gripping the wood so hard his knuckles were white. He turned around slowly, moving like a man in a nightmare who cannot run. He looked up at the screen. He saw himself. He saw Brianna. He heard his own laugh, that cruel, dismissive sound that I had lived with for years, mocking the 300 people in the room. Integrity, the Alistair on stage had said just moments ago. Liquidation, the Alistair on the screen said now. The juxtaposition was lethal. "Cut it!" Beatrice screamed. My mother-in-law, usually a statue of ice and decorum, had shattered. She was clawing at a security guard's arm, her nails digging into his jacket. "Turn it off! Cut the feed! Do something!" But the system was locked. Samantha had done her work with the precision of a surgeon. The video was not just playing, it was looping the most damning segments, burning them into the retinas of every shareholder, board member, and journalist in the room. "Once I get the CEO spot next month, I will divorce Katerina," the voice boomed again. "She is useless to the bloodline." The crowd turned to look at me. It was a physical sensation, the weight of 600 eyes pivoting in my direction. I felt the heat of their gaze. They expected to see a victim. They expected to see a woman collapsing in tears, humiliated, broken, running for the exit with her face buried in her hands. Instead, they saw the woman in the red dress. I did not shrink. I did not cry. I let the silence of my composure be the loudest thing in the room. I felt a strange, cold euphoria washing over me. It was the feeling of dropping a heavy pack after a long march. The fear was gone. The shame was gone. The desperate need to please these people, to fit into their narrow, suffocating box, was gone. I looked at Brianna. She was standing near the pillar where I had left her. She was no longer smirking. Her face was a mask of absolute terror. She was staring at the screen, watching her secret affair become a public spectacle. She looked at Alistair, waiting for him to save her, to take control, to do something. But Alistair was not looking at her. He was looking at his career burning to ash. At that moment, Brianna realized she was not the future Mrs. Sterling. She was just the evidence. The chaos in the room escalated. A waiter dropped a tray of champagne flutes, the crash sounding like a gunshot. People were shouting. Flashbulbs were erupting in a strobe light frenzy. The photographers abandoning all protocol to get the shot of the ruined CEO. "It is a fake," Conrad Sterling shouted, his voice cracking. He was trying to climb onto the stage, an old man desperate to stop the tide. "It is AI. It is a deep fake. Turn it off." But no one was listening to him. The truth was too specific, too detailed. The video showed the date and timestamp in the corner. It showed the specific papers on Alistair's desk, confidential merger documents that only the board knew about. It was undeniable. Alistair finally moved. He stumbled back from the podium as if it were radioactive. He looked out at the audience, his eyes wild, searching for an ally. He found none. He looked at the chairman. Eldridge slowly raised a shaking finger and pointed it at him. A gesture of absolute condemnation. Then, Alistair found me. I was standing in the center of the room, an island of red in a sea of black tuxedos. Our eyes locked across the distance. I saw the confusion in his gaze. He could not understand how the mouse had become the lion. He could not process that the useless wife, the woman he had dismissed as a fading accessory, had just executed him in front of the world. I held his gaze. I wanted him to see me. I wanted him to remember this moment for the rest of his life. I wanted him to remember that he had done this to himself. But I was the one who had turned on the lights. I raised my glass of sparkling water. It was a small gesture, subtle, almost imperceptible amidst the chaos. But he saw it. I tilted the glass toward him. A mock toast to the ruins of his empire, to the bloodline. I thought, to the useless wife. I took a sip, the bubbles sharp against my tongue. Then, I set the glass down on a passing table with a deliberate, final clink. I turned my back on him. The movement was slow, deliberate. I felt the swish of the heavy silk around my legs. I began to walk toward the double doors at the back of the ballroom. The crowd parted for me. It was biblical. Men who controlled billions of dollars stepped aside. Women who had whispered about my fertility issues behind their fans now looked at me with a mixture of fear and awe. They did not touch me. They did not speak to me. I was radioactive with power. "Katerina!" I heard Alistair's voice screaming my name. It was a desperate, ragged sound. "Katerina, wait. It is not what it looks like." I did not stop. I did not slow down. "Katerina!" He was chasing me. I could hear the commotion on stage. The sound of him scrambling down the stairs, tripping, shoving people aside. "Stop her!" Beatrice shrieked. "Do not let her leave with the narrative." But no one moved to stop me. The security guards, confused and overwhelmed, stood back. The guests were too busy filming with their phones to intervene. I reached the large mahogany doors. A young doorman, his eyes wide with shock, fumbled to open them for me. I stepped through the threshold, leaving the suffocating heat of the ballroom behind. The hallway was cooler, quieter, but the noise of the explosion I had detonated still roared behind me. I walked down the long, carpeted corridor of the Pierre Hotel. My heels clicked rhythmically on the floor. Click, click, click. It was the sound of a clock ticking down to 0. My heart was pounding, a frantic drum solo against my ribs. But my breathing was steady. I placed a hand on my stomach. "We did it, Leo," I whispered. "We really did it." I felt a tear slide down my cheek. It was not a tear of sadness. It was the physical release of 7 years of poison leaving my body, 7 years of biting my tongue, 7 years of injections, of doctor's appointments, of Beatrice's sneers, of Alistair's neglect. It was all washing away. I turned the corner toward the lobby. I needed to get to the car. I needed to get to the safe house. The adrenaline was high, but I knew the crash would come. I needed to be safe when it did. As I reached the lobby, I saw the revolving doors and the night beyond. The air outside would be cold, crisp, clean. I did not look back. I knew what was happening in that ballroom. The stock price was likely already plummeting in after-hours trading. The board was likely convening an emergency meeting in the hallway. Alistair was likely being restrained by his father. I pushed through the revolving doors and stepped out onto Fifth Avenue. The city was alive, indifferent to the tragedy of the Sterling family. The lights of the skyscrapers twinkled like diamonds, but unlike the ones in the ballroom, these felt real. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the exhaust and chill of New York City. It tasted like freedom. "Mrs. Sterling?" A paparazzi photographer, one who had been waiting outside for the inevitable exit shots, stepped forward. He lowered his camera, looking at me with confusion. He had expected the smiling couple. He saw a woman alone, fierce, walking with the stride of a conqueror. "Where is Mr. Sterling?" he asked. I stopped. I looked at him. I looked at the lens of his camera. "Mr. Sterling is indisposed," I said, my voice clear and steady. "He is currently explaining to his shareholders why he bet against his own family." The photographer blinked. He didn't understand yet. He didn't know that inside that hotel, the world had changed. "Is there a statement?" he asked, sensing blood. I looked back at the hotel, at the golden awning, at the fortress I was leaving forever. "The truth," I said, "always has a way of coming out. Sometimes it just needs a little help with the audio-visual equipment." I turned and walked toward the waiting black sedan. The driver, hired by my security team, opened the door. I slid into the leather seat. "Drive," I said, as the car pulled away, merging into the stream of yellow taxis. I closed my eyes. I was tired. God, I was so tired. But for the first time in a decade, I was not afraid. I was free. The walk from the ballroom to the lobby of the Pierre Hotel was a blur of gilded corridors and panicked whispers. But the real violence happened 10 feet from the revolving doors. I had thought I was clear. I thought I had left the wreckage behind me, burning in high definition. but a dying animal always thrashes before it goes still. I heard the heavy, erratic slapping of dress shoes against marble before I heard his voice. It was the sound of a man running without grace, a man stripping away his dignity with every desperate stride. "Katerina!" The scream was ragged, tearing out of Alistair's throat like a physical object. It echoed off the high ceilings of the lobby, causing the concierge to drop a phone and 2 tourists to freeze in their tracks. I did not turn around. I kept my eyes on the brass handle of the door, my pace steady, my hand resting protectively on my stomach beneath the red silk. But he was faster. Adrenaline and terror had given him a burst of speed I had never seen on the tennis court. Just as I reached for the door, a hand clamped down on my upper arm. It was tight, painful, and desperate. The grip was strong enough to bruise. He spun me around. Alistair Sterling, the man who had been poised to rule the corporate world 10 minutes ago, looked like he had been thrown from a moving vehicle. His hair was wild, standing up in tufts where he had run his hands through it. His bow tie was hanging loose around his neck like a noose. His face was a map of sheer, unadulterated panic. Sweat was streaming down his temples, ruining the makeup he had worn for the cameras. "You did this," he hissed, his eyes wide and bloodshot. "You ruined everything. You crazy bitch. You destroyed us." I looked at his hand on my arm. The manicure was perfect, but the grip was savage. "Let go of me, Alistair," I said. My voice was low, devoid of emotion. It was the voice of a judge delivering a sentence. "No!" he shouted, shaking me. "You are going to go back in there. You are going to take the microphone. You are going to tell them it was a fake. You are going to tell them you made it up because you are sick. Fix this. Katerina, fix it now." He raised his other hand, not to strike me, I think, but to emphasize his point, to grab my other shoulder. He was losing control. He was dangerous not because he was strong, but because he was collapsing. Then, the air shifted. A large shadow blocked out the lobby chandelier. A hand, the size of a catcher's mitt, clamped down on Alistair's wrist, the one holding me. "Sir, I am going to ask you to release Mrs. Sterling." A deep, baritone voice rumbled. It was Marcus, the head of the private security detail I had hired 3 days ago using the advance from my settlement money. Marcus was 6 feet 4 inches of former military discipline. He did not yell. He did not panic. He simply applied pressure. Alistair gasped, his eyes darting to the bodyguard. "Who the hell are you? Get your hands off me. I am Alistair Sterling. You are assaulting my client," Marcus said calmly. "Let go. Now." He squeezed. Alistair's fingers sprang open as if he had been shocked. I stepped back, smoothing the silk of my sleeve where his hand had wrinkled it. "Don't touch me, Alistair," I said. I looked him in the eye. "Never touch me again." Alistair rubbed his wrist, looking between me and Marcus. The reality of his situation was crashing down on him. He was not the CEO commanding a subordinate. He was a man being handled by hired muscle. "Katerina, please," he begged, his voice breaking, shifting instantly from aggression to pathetic bargaining. "Think about the baby. Think about the legacy. We can say it was a hack. We can say it was the Russians. Just help me. I will give you anything. I will double the settlement. $4 million. $5 million. Just tell them it is a lie." I looked at him with a pity that felt colder than hate. He still thought this was a negotiation. He still thought there was a price tag on my dignity. "It is not a lie, Alistair," I said, "and that is why you cannot buy your way out of it." I turned and pushed through the revolving doors. If the lobby was a skirmish, the sidewalk was a war zone. The moment I stepped out into the cool New York night, the world exploded into white light. The paparazzi had been tipped off, likely by the frantic tweets coming from inside the ballroom, and they had swarmed the entrance like locusts. "Mrs. Sterling, Mrs. Sterling, is it true? Did he really say those things? Are you divorcing him? Katerina, look here, look here." The shouts were a wall of noise. Microphones were thrust in my face. Recording devices held aloft like spears. Marcus and his team formed a wedge, Pushing a path through the mass of bodies toward the waiting black SUV, I stopped for one brief second before entering the car. I turned to the sea of flashing lights. I knew this image would be on the cover of every newspaper in America tomorrow. The lady in red. The woman who burned the castle down. I looked directly into the lens of the nearest camera. The truth always has a way of coming out, I said. Then I ducked into the car. The heavy door slammed shut, cutting off the noise instantly. The sudden silence was jarring. I sank back into the leather seat, my hands finally starting to tremble. "Drive," Marcus said from the front seat. As the car peeled away from the curb, merging into the traffic of Fifth Avenue, I pulled out my phone. My notifications were a solid block of white text. My name was trending. Vanguardia was trending. Alistair was trending. I opened the social media app and watched the world react in real time. It was a digital avalanche. The hashtag Vanguardia scandal was the #1 topic globally. Clips of the video, recorded by guests on their phones, were circulating with millions of views already. One comment read, "She didn't just divorce him, she nuked him from orbit. Queen." Another read, "RIP Vanguardia stock, selling everything at open." And another, "The way he looked at the screen. That is the face of a man who knows he is finished." I watched the stock futures. In the after-hours trading markets, Vanguardia Global Solutions was in free fall. The stock had dropped 12% in 20 minutes. By morning, billions of dollars of market capitalization would be wiped out. The sterling fortune, tied almost entirely to the stock price, was hemorrhaging value by the second. I set the phone down. I felt a wave of nausea, sharp and sudden. I opened a bottle of water from the center console and took small sips. "We are going to the safe house," Marcus said, glancing at me in the rearview mirror. "We have a tail, but we will lose them in Queens." I nodded. I leaned my head against the cool glass and watched the city blur by. I did not feel triumphant. I felt hollowed out. Revenge is not sweet. It is exhausting work. By the time we arrived at the safe house, a nondescript brownstone in Brooklyn that Samantha had arranged under a shell corporation, it was 3 o'clock in the morning. I walked inside, locked the door, and collapsed onto the bed without taking off my dress. I did not dream. I simply ceased to exist for 14 hours. I woke up to the smell of coffee. Samantha was in the kitchen, scrolling through a tablet. She looked up when I walked in, wearing a bathrobe I had found in the closet. "Sleeping Beauty awakes," she said. "You might want to sit down. The world is on fire." I poured a cup of coffee and sat at the small wooden table. "What is the damage?" Samantha turned the tablet around. "Total carnage," she said. "The board held an emergency meeting at midnight. Alistair was fired effective immediately. They voted unanimously to remove him. They are bringing Marcus, the old CEO, back as interim until they can find someone who hasn't committed securities fraud on camera." "Fired," I whispered. It was one thing to plan it. It was another to hear it. The Crown Prince was in exile. "And the Sterlings?" I asked. "They are in full damage control mode." Samantha said, "They released a statement at 6 o'clock this morning. They are claiming the video is a malicious deep fake created by foreign actors to destabilize the American economy. They are calling you a victim of manipulation. They are threatening to sue everyone who shares the video." I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. The deep fake defense. I knew they would try that. It is the only card they have left. "They are saying the audio was synthesized," Samantha continued, "and that the visual of Brianna was superimposed. They are doubling down. Kat, they are going to try to gaslight the entire world." I stood up and walked to my bag. I pulled out the external hard drive. "Then let us turn the lights up a little brighter," I said. I handed the drive to Samantha. "Release the forensic report." Samantha grinned. "I thought you would never ask." The report, prepared by a top independent forensic digital analyst I had hired weeks ago, was a masterpiece of technical verification. It analyzed the metadata of the original file. It showed the light refraction, the pixel density, the audio wave continuity. It proved, beyond a shadow of a scientific doubt, that the video was raw, unedited, and authentic. We sent the report to the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and the Securities and Exchange Commission. We included the raw file for their own analysts to verify. Within an hour, the headline changed. Forensic analysis confirms authenticity of Sterling tapes. Vanguardia stock halted. The deep fake defense crumbled like wet paper. The Sterlings looked not just guilty but delusional. The public turned on them with renewed viciousness. They were not just liars. They were insulting the public's intelligence. But the real knife in Alistair's back did not come from me. It came from the person I least expected. Around noon, I turned on the television. A breaking news alert flashed across the screen. An exclusive interview was airing. There, sitting in a studio with a tear-streaked face and a modest cardigan, was Brianna. She looked young, vulnerable, and terrified. She was playing the role of her life. He was my boss. Brianna sobbed, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. He was powerful. He told me that if I didn't do what he wanted, he would ruin me. I was just the nanny. I was 24. I was scared. He preyed on me. I stared at the screen, my mouth slightly open. She was flipping the script. She was no longer the co-conspirator. She was the victim of power dynamics. She was throwing Alistair to the wolves to save herself. He promised me things, Brianna continued, her voice trembling. He told me his wife was abusive. He told me he was trapped. I didn't know about the fraud. I didn't know about his plans for the company. I was just a girl he used. It was a lie. Of course. She had been an active participant. She had mocked me. She had plotted with him. But the public would eat it up. Alistair was the villain. She was just collateral damage. That is the end of him, Samantha said quietly. He has lost his job, his reputation, his wife, and now his mistress. He is radioactive. The final fracture happened that evening. My phone buzzed with a text from Miller, my private investigator. He had a source inside the Sterling estate staff. War at the big house. The text read, Conrad just threw Beatrice out of the library. He is blaming her for the heir scheme. Says she brought the viper into the nest. Lawyers are arriving. Looks like the parents are turning on each other. I put the phone down. The house of Sterling was not just falling. It was imploding. Conrad was blaming Beatrice. Beatrice was likely blaming Alistair. Alistair was blaming me. And Brianna was blaming Alistair. They were eating each other alive. I walked to the window of the brownstone and looked out at the street. The sun was setting, casting long shadows over Brooklyn. I felt a flutter in my stomach, a real one this time. Not a cramp, but a movement. I placed my hand on my belly. You are safe, I whispered to Leo. You are never going to be part of that poison. I had destroyed an empire in 24 hours. I had cost them billions of dollars. I had ruined 3 lives. But as I stood there, watching the twilight settle over the city, I felt no guilt. I had simply held up a mirror. Now came the hard part, the negotiation. They were down, but they were not dead, and a wounded beast is the most dangerous kind. I turned to Samantha. Get the lawyer on the phone. I said, they are going to call us soon. I want to be ready to dictate the terms of surrender. Samantha nodded. What do you want, Kat? I looked at the television, where Alistair's face was being shown next to a plummeting red line on a graph. I want everything, I said, and then I want to disappear. The aftermath was not just the end of the battle, it was the beginning of the harvest, and I intended to reap every single thing I had sown. 2 weeks had passed since the gala, and the silence from the Sterling estate was louder than the roar of the ocean that bordered it. I sat in Elias Thorne's office, 50 floors above Manhattan, watching the rain streak against the glass. The city looked gray and washed out, but inside this room, everything was sharp, bright, and expensive. They are decimated, Elias said, tossing a stack of newspapers onto the mahogany table. Vanguardia stock is down 60%. The SEC has opened a formal investigation into Alistair for insider trading and securities fraud based on your video. The board has erased him. He is currently holed up in the Hamptons house with the blinds drawn, refusing to speak to anyone but his criminal defense team. And the divorce? I asked, sipping my water. We filed this morning, Elias said, leaning back in his leather chair. Grounds of adultery, obviously, but we are also filing a motion to nullify the previous separation agreement and the non-disclosure agreement. We are citing coercion, fraud, and duress. Given the video evidence of him plotting to defraud the shareholders, proving that he negotiated with you in bad faith will be a walk in the park. The NDA is worth less than the paper it is printed on. Good, I said, because I have one more amendment to the filing. Elias raised an eyebrow. Oh, did we miss an offshore account? No, I said. I placed a hand on my stomach. We need to add a custody petition. Elias froze. He looked at my hand, then at my face. His shark-like eyes widened for the first time since I had met him. You are pregnant? He whispered. 10 weeks, I said. It happened naturally, just before everything fell apart. Elias let out a low whistle. He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city. He ran a hand through his hair. Does Alistair know? He asked, turning back to me. No, I said, but he will soon. I allowed my insurance information to update yesterday. The notification for my prenatal vitamins will be sent to the primary policyholder. That is Alistair. Katerina, Elias said, a slow, predatory grin spreading across his face. Do you realize what you have done? You have not just nuked the bridge. You have stranded them on a burning island. Alistair is finished. His reputation is ash. He will likely go to prison. The Sterling name is mud. The only thing that family cares about is legacy. If you are carrying a legitimate heir, you own them. I know, I said. That is why I am ready to negotiate. The buzzer to my apartment rang at 8 o'clock that evening. I checked the monitor. I expected a courier or perhaps a process server. It was Beatrice. She looked 20 years older than she had at the gala. Her hair, usually a helmet of hairspray and perfection, was slightly windblown. She was wearing a trench coat and dark glasses. Despite it being night, she looked like a fugitive. I buzzed her in. I left the door unlocked and sat on the sofa, waiting. When she walked in, she did not look at the view or the furniture. She looked straight at me. She scanned my body, her eyes locking onto my midsection like a heat-seeking missile. Is it true? She demanded, skipping the pleasantries. Hello, Beatrice, I said calmly. Would you like some tea? I have herbal. I am avoiding caffeine these days. She slammed her purse onto the entryway table. Cut the theatrics. Katerina, we got the insurance notification. Are you pregnant? Yes, I said. Beatrice let out a sound that was half sob, half laugh. She walked over and collapsed into the armchair opposite me. She took off her glasses. Her eyes were red-rimmed and puffy. The Iron Lady of the Hamptons was rusting. Thank God, she whispered. Thank God. I am confused, I said, tilting my head. 2 weeks ago, you told me I was useless to the bloodline. You told me I was carrying nothing but disappointment. Why the sudden piety? Beatrice looked at me, and for a moment, the old venom returned. Do not be thick, Katerina. The situation has changed. Alistair is unwell. The investigation is destroying him. The board has blacklisted him. Brianna, that little snake, has gone to the press and painted him as a monster. She claims her pregnancy was a false alarm, or perhaps she terminated it. It does not matter. She is gone. So you are out of heirs, I said. We are out of options, Beatrice hissed. But this changes things. A legitimate child. A Sterling heir born within the marriage. It gives us a future. It gives us a narrative to rebuild the family image. She leaned forward, her hands grasping the air as if she could physically snatch the baby from my womb. We will act as if the divorce is amicable, Beatrice said, her voice picking up speed, planning, scheming. We will say the separation was a misunderstanding. You will move back to the estate. I laughed. It was a loud, genuine laugh that startled her. "Move back?" I asked. "Beatrice, do you think I am insane? I am divorcing your son. I am testifying against him if the SEC asks me to. I am never stepping foot in that house again." "You have to," she cried. "That child is a Sterling. He belongs to us." "He belongs to me," I said. "He is my son, and he will not be raised by a family that treats people like livestock. He will not be raised to think that betrayal is a business strategy." Beatrice stood up, her face twisting into a snarl. "You cannot keep him from us. We have lawyers. Katerina, we have resources you cannot imagine. We will sue for full custody. We will paint you as unfit. We will drag you through the courts until you are bankrupt. You signed a contract. Remember? We have the medical records. We will use them." I stared at her. She was still trying to play the same hand, not realizing the game had changed. "Sit down, Beatrice," I said. "I will not." "Sit down," I commanded. She sat. I picked up my phone. I tapped the screen and opened an audio file. "I want you to listen to something," I said. I pressed play. The recording was clear. It was from the library. The night of the intervention. Beatrice's voice. "If you don't produce a child by year's end." The board might suggest Alistair needs a partner more aligned with the company's future. I skipped forward. Beatrice's voice. "We have been very concerned about you. Katerina, the migraines, the mood swings. Doctor Arrington is prepared to testify that you are suffering from severe emotional instability." I skipped forward again. Beatrice's voice. "We will paint you as a hysterical, dangerous woman who had to be removed for her own safety. You will never work in media again." I stopped the recording. Beatrice was the color of old paper. She stared at the phone as if it were a loaded gun. "I have been recording you for months," I said softly. "I have recordings of Alistair admitting to fraud. I have recordings of you conspiring to blackmail me with falsified medical records. That is a felony. Beatrice, it is conspiracy. It is extortion." I leaned forward. "If you try to take my son," I said, my voice dropping to a whisper, "if you even look at a family court judge, I will release every single second of these tapes to the press. I will put Dr. Arrington in prison. I will ensure that not only is Alistair ruined, but you and Conrad are indicted as accomplices. You will spend the rest of your life in a federal prison cell, wearing an orange jumpsuit that definitely does not match your eyes." Beatrice trembled. Her hands shook in her lap. She looked small. She looked defeated. She realized, finally, that the power had shifted. She was no longer the matriarch. She was a hostage. "What do you want?" she whispered. "I want a meeting," I said. "Tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock, my lawyer's office. Bring Alistair, bring Conrad, and bring a checkbook." The conference room at Elias Thorne's firm was a sterile glass box. We sat on one side of the long table, me and Elias. On the other side sat the ruins of the Sterling dynasty. Alistair looked like a corpse. He had lost 20 pounds. His suit hung off his frame. He had not shaved in days, and his eyes were hollow, staring at the table. He did not look at me. He could not. Conrad sat next to him, looking grim and furious. Beatrice was there, silent and pale, refusing to make eye contact with anyone. Elias slid a document across the table. It was thick. "Here are the terms," Elias said. "Mrs. Sterling will be granted a full divorce on the grounds of adultery and cruel and inhumane treatment. She will retain sole legal and physical custody of the unborn child." "Sole custody?" Conrad barked. "Absolutely not. The boy is a Sterling. We have a right to visitation." "You have a right to remain silent," I said, cutting him off. "Unless you want the extortion tapes played on Good Morning America tomorrow." Conrad clamped his mouth shut. He looked at Beatrice, who gave a tiny, terrified shake of her head. She had warned him. "Sole custody," Elias repeated. "Mr. Sterling will surrender his parental rights. However, the child will retain his inheritance rights to the Sterling Trust. You want us to pay for a child we cannot see? Alistair spoke up, his voice raspy. He finally looked at me. There was no love left, only a deep, festering hate. You are a thief, Katerina. I am a mother, I replied, and I am protecting my child from a toxic environment. You are not fit to be a father. Alistair, you were ready to sell your grandfather's legacy for cash. What would you sell your son for? Alistair flinched. Financials, Elias continued. We are waiving the $2 million from the previous agreement. Generous, Conrad muttered. Instead, Elias said, flipping a page, we are demanding a lump sum settlement of $50 million. That is approximately half of Alistair's personal trust fund and liquid assets. 50 million, Alistair shouted, slamming his hand on the table. You are out of your mind. I will never sign that. I will rot in hell before I give you $50 million. You are already in hell. Alistair, I said, calm as a frozen lake. I am just negotiating the rent. We will go to court, Alistair spat. I don't care about the tapes. I don't care about the jail time. I will drag you down with me. I will spend every penny I have to make sure you get nothing. He stood up, his chair scraping violently against the floor. He looked ready to lunge across the table. I am not signing, Alistair declared, looking at his father. Let her release the tapes. Who cares? We are already ruined. Conrad remained seated. He looked at his son. Then he looked at me. He looked at the calm determination in my eyes. He was a businessman, first and foremost. He knew when a deal was bad, but he also knew when bankruptcy was the only alternative to death. Sit down, Alistair, Conrad said. Dad, you cannot be serious. Sit down, Conrad roared. The sound echoed in the glass room. Alistair slowly sank back into his chair. Stunned, Conrad turned to me. If we pay the $50 million and grant full custody, the tapes, the originals? Destroyed, I said. And I will sign a new NDA, one that says I will never speak of the Sterlings again. I will disappear. You will never see me or the child. You can go back to trying to salvage your company without me pouring gasoline on the fire. Conrad nodded slowly. He looked at the document. He picked up a pen. It is the only way to save the name, Conrad muttered, more to himself than to Alistair. If those extortion tapes come out, we will be indicted. The assets will be frozen. We will lose everything. $50 million is a bargain to stay out of federal prison. He shoved the document toward Alistair. Sign it, Conrad ordered. Dad? Sign it, you fool, Conrad hissed. You caused this. You brought this woman into our house. You slept with the nanny. You bragged about fraud on camera. You have cost us billions. You will sign this check, and then you will get on a plane to Europe, and you will stay there until I tell you to come back. Alistair looked at the pen. He looked at the document. His hand was shaking so badly he could barely hold the instrument. Tears of rage and impotence welled in his eyes. He looked at me one last time. He wanted to scream. He wanted to kill me, but he was powerless. He lowered the pen to the paper. He signed, Alistair Sterling. It was a messy, jagged signature, the signature of a broken man. Elias pulled the papers back immediately, checking the signature. He nodded to me. We are done here, Elias said. I stood up. I did not offer to shake hands. The money is to be wired within 24 hours, I said. Once it clears, I will delete the files. Goodbye, Katerina, Beatrice whispered. She was looking at my stomach. She was mourning the grandson she would never hold. Goodbye, Beatrice, I said. I walked to the door. Alistair was still staring at his hands. Katerina, Alistair said, his voice barely audible. I stopped, my hand on the door handle. Did you ever love me? He asked. I looked back at him. I thought about the first year of our marriage. I thought about the way he used to look at me before the pressure and the greed took over. I did, I said honestly. I loved the man I thought you were, but that man never existed. He was just a role you were playing for the shareholders. I opened the door and walked out. I walked through the office, past the secretaries, past the paralegals. I walked to the elevator and pressed the button for the lobby. As the doors closed, shutting out the world of the Sterlings forever, I let out a breath I felt like I had been holding for 7 years. I was divorced. I was wealthy. I was free. And inside me, safe and sound. Leo turned a somersault, as if he knew that we had just won the game. The Pacific Coast Highway is a ribbon of asphalt that separates the mountains from the edge of the world. Here in Big Sur, the ocean does not politely lap at the shore like it does in the Hamptons. It crashes. It roars against the jagged cliffs with a violence that feels ancient and honest. The air smells of salt spray, crushed eucalyptus leaves, and damp earth. It is the smell of life, messy and vibrant. 6 months have passed since I walked out of the Pierre Hotel in a blood-red dress. 6 months since I set fire to the House of Sterling and watched it burn in the rearview mirror of a black SUV. I sat on the expansive redwood deck of my new home, wrapped in a cashmere blanket that was soft against my skin. My hands rested on the swell of my stomach, which was now undeniable. I was 8.5 months pregnant. The doctor said I was carrying big, a strong boy who was already eager to make his entrance. My life in New York felt like a movie I had watched a long time ago, a grainy, black and white film about a woman who was slowly suffocating. The woman I was now, sitting under the vast California sky, was in Technicolor. I had gained weight, not just the baby weight, but healthy weight. The hollows in my cheeks were gone. The dark circles under my eyes had been replaced by a glow that my friends insisted was hormonal, but which I knew was simply the absence of stress. I adjusted the laptop on the table next to me. The screen showed the logo of my new venture, Thornfield Crisis Management. It was ironic, really. I had used the $50 million extracted from the Sterling fortune to build a fortress for other women. I was not just a rich divorcee spending her days at the spa. I was a consultant. I worked with high-profile women, actresses, politicians' wives, CEO spouses, who were trapped in gilded cages similar to the one I had escaped. I taught them how to document, how to secure their assets, and how to control the narrative before their husbands could destroy them. My phone buzzed. It was a text from a client in Chicago, the wife of a famous tech mogul. He threatened to take the kids again. The text read, "I am scared." I typed back immediately, "Do not be scared. Be prepared. Did you record the conversation as we discussed?" "Yes." "Good. Send it to the lawyer. We control the chessboard now." I set the phone down. Helping them healed something in me. Every time I helped a woman secure her freedom, I felt another brick of my own trauma dissolve. I took a sip of my herbal tea and opened a new tab on my browser. I typed in a familiar name, a habit I indulged in only once a week, Alistair Sterling. The search results were no longer dominated by the scandal. The world had moved on. As the world always does, the headlines were smaller now, buried in the business sections. Vanguardia Global Solutions assets, acquired by Shenzhen Heavy Industries. The company was gone. The Sterling legacy, built over 3 generations, had been chopped up and sold for parts to pay off the massive SEC fines and shareholder lawsuits. The name Vanguardia no longer existed. And Alistair? I scrolled down. There was a small article from a Swiss financial journal. Alistair Sterling appointed junior consultant at Rochambeau Partners in Geneva. He was working a mid-level job in Europe. He had been exiled. The social circles of New York and London had closed their doors to him. He was toxic. No reputable board would touch him. He was living in a small apartment, likely telling anyone who would listen that he was a victim of a conspiracy. I felt nothing, no anger, no satisfaction, just a mild indifference, like reading about a weather system on another continent. As for Brianna, she had vanished into the ether. The rumors, dug up by Miller, who I still kept on retainer, suggested she had either never been pregnant or had lost the baby shortly after the settlement check cleared. The Sterlings had paid her a quiet sum to disappear. terrified she would do another interview. She was irrelevant. A footnote in the history of my liberation. I heard the crunch of gravel on the driveway. A moment later, Samantha walked onto the deck, carrying 2 large green smoothies. "You look like an Earth Mother," Samantha said, grinning. She was wearing ripped jeans and a band t-shirt, a stark contrast to the tactical gear she had worn in the AV booth that night. "I feel like a whale," I corrected, accepting the smoothie. "A very zen whale." Samantha sat down in the Adirondack chair next to me. She looked out at the ocean. "Have you heard from him?" "Who? The exile?" "Yeah." "Actually," I said, reaching into my bag, "I got a letter yesterday, forwarded by the lawyers." I pulled out a cream-colored envelope. The handwriting was familiar, looping, aristocratic, and jagged. "Read it," Samantha said. "I already did," I replied. "He says he is suffering. He says the Swiss winters are depressing. He says he misses the Hamptons. He says he forgives me." Samantha choked on her smoothie. "He forgives you? Can you believe the audacity?" I laughed. "He thinks he is the martyr. He takes no responsibility. He thinks I ruined his life for sport, not because he was planning to destroy mine." "What are you going to do with it?" I stood up, groaning slightly as my lower back protested. I walked over to the stone fire pit at the edge of the deck. I had lit a small fire earlier to ward off the morning chill. "I am going to do what I should have done with our marriage license 7 years ago," I said. I tossed the envelope into the flames. We watched in silence as the paper curled and blackened. The blue ink of his handwriting turned to ash. The fire consumed his excuses, his pity, and his ego. It burned bright for a second, then vanished into smoke that was carried away by the Pacific breeze. "Good riddance," Samantha said, raising her glass. "Amen," I said. Later that afternoon, I drove into town to pick up supplies. The town of Big Sur was small, artistic, and uninterested in status. I parked my Range Rover, a safety indulgence, and walked into the local organic market. I was inspecting avocados when a voice spoke behind me. "You want the ones that are dark, but give a little when you press them. Those are ready for tonight." I turned around. It was Lucas. Lucas was an architect I had met 2 months ago at a local gallery opening. He was 40, with salt and pepper hair, laugh lines around his eyes, and hands that looked like they actually built things. He designed sustainable, off-grid homes. He drove a beat-up truck. He had no idea who Alistair Sterling was, and he didn't care. "I know how to pick an avocado, Lucas." I smiled. "I am just offering my expertise," he grinned, leaning against the display. "How is the little linebacker doing?" "Kicking my ribs," I said, rubbing my side. "He thinks my bladder is a trampoline." Lucas laughed. It was a warm, deep sound. He reached out and touched my arm, gentle and respectful. "You look beautiful, Kat, truly." "I look like I swallowed a watermelon," I said, blushing despite myself. "You look like life," he said. We walked to the counter together. Lucas insisted on carrying my bags to the car. He was kind. He was uncomplicated. We had gone for walks on the beach, and once, we had dinner at a small seafood shack. He knew I was divorced. He knew I had a complicated past, though I spared him the details of the viral video. He didn't push. He didn't try to own me. He simply existed in my orbit, a warm and steady presence. "Call me if you need anything," Lucas said as he loaded the bags into my trunk. "Even if it is just someone to yell at because your back hurts." "I might take you up on that," I said. I watched him walk away. It was nice to feel desired, but even nicer to know that I didn't need him. I was not looking for a father for Leo. I was not looking for a husband to complete me. I was complete. Lucas was just a pleasant addition to a life that was already full. I drove back to the house, feeling the baby turn. Soon, I thought. 2 weeks later, the world changed again. It started at 2 o'clock in the morning, a sharp, tightening pain that wrapped around my lower back and squeezed. I woke up, gasping. I waited. 10 minutes later, it happened again. I did not panic. I had taken the birthing classes alone. I had sat in a room full of couples, the only woman without a partner holding her hand, and I had held my head high. I had learned to breathe. I had learned that my body was built for this. I called Samantha, who was staying in the guest cottage. She was at my bedside in 3 minutes. Hair wild, eyes wide. "Is it time?" she asked. "It is time," I said, breathing through a contraction. The drive to the hospital in Monterey was quiet. The moon was full, reflecting off the black ocean. I focused on the rhythm of the pain. It was a productive pain. It was not the pain of betrayal or heartbreak, which destroys you. This was the pain of creation. It had a purpose. I labored for 12 hours. There were moments when I thought I couldn't do it. Moments when the exhaustion threatened to pull me under, in the transition phase. I gripped Samantha's hand so hard, I thought I might break her fingers. "I can't," I whispered, sweat matting my hair to my forehead. "Sam, I can't do this alone." "You are not alone," Samantha said fiercely, wiping my face with a cool cloth. "And you have walked through fire. Kat, you destroyed a dynasty. You can push out a baby." I laughed. A weak, breathless sound. She was right. "Okay," I said. "Okay." And then, the moment of crossover, the doctor, a calm woman with strong hands, told me to push. I summoned every ounce of strength I had left. I thought of Beatrice telling me I was useless. I thought of Alistair calling me barren. I took all that rage, all that hurt, and I converted it into power. I pushed for them. I pushed to prove them wrong. I pushed for myself. A cry pierced the air. It was loud, angry, and beautiful. "He is here," the doctor said. Lifting him up, they placed him on my chest. He was warm, wet, and heavy. He squirmed against me. His skin flushed pink, his fists clenched ready to fight the world. I looked at him. He had my dark hair. He had my chin. The room faded away. Samantha, the doctors, the machines. They all blurred into the background. It was just me and him. I touched his tiny, perfect hand. He grasped my finger, his grip surprisingly strong. "Hello," I whispered. Tears streamed down my face, hot and cleansing. "Hello, my love." I checked his fingers. 10. I checked his toes. 10. He was perfect. He was not an heir. He was not a legacy. He was a human being. "What is his name?" the nurse asked, hovering with a clipboard. I didn't hesitate. I had known the name for months. I didn't want a Sterling name. I didn't want a name that sounded like old money or pretension. I wanted a name that meant strength. I wanted a name that belonged to the animal that had protected us. "Leo," I said. "His name is Leo." "And the last name?" the nurse asked. "Is it Sterling?" I looked at my son. I looked at the new life we were starting. The Sterling name was a chain. It was a brand of ownership. "No," I said clearly. "His name is Leo Thornfield." I gave him my maiden name, the name I had reclaimed, the name of the woman who survived. I lay back against the pillows, exhaustion washing over me like a warm tide. Leo settled against my chest, his breathing syncing with mine. I closed my eyes. For 7 years, I had been defined by who I was married to. I was the trophy wife, the barren woman, the accessory. Now, I was just Katerina, and I was a mother. And as I drifted into sleep, holding my lion cub, I realized that I had never been useless. I had been waiting, and the wait was finally over. The magazine lay on the coffee table made of reclaimed driftwood, its glossy cover catching the afternoon sunlight that streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my Big Sur home. It was Vanity Fair, and for the first time in history, the woman on the cover was not an actress promoting a film or a politician seeking votes. It was me. The photograph was starkly different from the society pages I used to inhabit. There were no diamonds, no ball gowns, no stiff, rehearsed smiles next to a man in a tuxedo. In the photo, I was wearing a simple white linen shirt. windblown and rolled at the sleeves. Standing on the cliffs with the Pacific Ocean raging behind me, I looked directly into the lens, my eyes clear and unshadowed. The headline was bold, black text that dominated the lower half of the page. Katerina Thornfield, the woman who walked through fire. It had been exactly 1 year since the gala. 1 year since the night the world watched Alistair Sterling destroy himself in high definition. I picked up the magazine, not out of vanity, but out of a sense of disbelief that the person in the photo was actually me. The article inside was not a gossip piece. It was a profile on my firm. Thornfield Crisis Management. In 12 months, I had built a sanctuary for women who were being erased by powerful men. I had turned my trauma into a shield for others. We had handled 3 high-profile divorces in the last quarter alone, securing settlements that made the husbands weep in their boardrooms. But the most important achievement of the last year was not the business. It was currently sitting in a high chair in the kitchen, smashing a piece of avocado into his hair. "Leo," I laughed, walking into the kitchen. "That is supposed to go in your mouth, little lion." Leo looked up at me and grinned. He had 2 bottom teeth and a laugh that sounded like pure distilled joy. He was 6 months old now, a sturdy, happy boy with eyes that held the same dark intensity as mine. He looked nothing like the Sterlings. He looked like the ocean, wild and free. I cleaned him up, a process that involved more giggling than actual cleaning, and strapped him into his stroller. Today was a beautiful day, the kind of California afternoon where the gold light turns everything into a painting. We were meeting Samantha and Lucas for a picnic at the state park down the road. As I pushed the stroller down the winding path that led from my property to the public park, I breathed in the scent of sage and salt. My life was simple now. I woke up when Leo woke up. I worked while he napped. I spent my evenings watching the sunset with friends who loved me for my humor. Not my husband's stock portfolio. The park was relatively empty, just a few tourists taking photos of the Bixby Bridge in the distance. I found our usual spot, a grassy knoll overlooking the water, and spread out a blanket. I took Leo out of the stroller and let him sit on the grass. He was fascinated by a dandelion, grabbing it with his chubby fist. I sat back, closing my eyes, feeling the warmth of the sun on my face. Then, I heard the sound of an engine. It was not the rumble of a local pickup truck or the hum of a tourist's rental sedan. It was the purr of a finely tuned, 12-cylinder engine. It was a sound I knew well, a sound that belonged to a life I had left behind. I opened my eyes. A long, black town car had pulled into the gravel lot at the edge of the park. It looked ridiculously out of place against the backdrop of rugged cliffs and dusty trails. It was a vehicle designed for Park Avenue, not the Pacific Coast Highway. The back door opened. A woman stepped out. She was using a cane. She wore a tailored gray suit that looked too heavy for the warm weather, and a silk scarf tied around her neck. She walked slowly, her posture stooped, her movements hesitant. It took me a moment to recognize her. It was Beatrice Sterling, the woman who had once terrified me. The matriarch who could silence a room with a raised eyebrow looked like a ghost. She had aged 20 years in 12 months. Her hair, once dyed a fierce, unnatural chestnut, was now completely white and thin. Her face was gaunt, the skin hanging loosely around her jawline. She saw me. She stopped. I did not move. I did not grab Leo and run. I simply sat there, my hand resting on my son's back, and waited. Beatrice signaled to her driver to stay by the car. She began the long walk across the grass toward us. Every step seemed to cost her something. She looked at the uneven ground with fear, as if she might shatter if she fell. When she was 10 feet away, she stopped. She leaned heavily on her cane, her breath coming in shallow gasps. "Katerina," she said. Her voice was thin, reedy. It lacked the steel that had once defined it. "Beatrice," I replied. My voice was calm. My heart rate did not even spike. She looked at me. Then her gaze drifted down to the boy sitting on the blanket, Leo was busy inspecting his own toes, oblivious to the presence of the woman who had once plotted to steal him. Beatrice's eyes filled with tears. Her hands, wrapped around the handle of her cane, trembled violently. "Is that him?" she whispered. "This is Leo," I said. "Leo," she repeated, testing the name. "A strong name, a Sterling name." "No," I corrected her gently but firmly. "A Thornfield name." She flinched as if I had slapped her. She took a half-step closer, her hunger visible. He looks like Alistair around the eyes." "He looks like himself," I said. Beatrice looked back at me. Her eyes were pleading. It was a look of utter desperation. "Conrad left me. You know, he blamed me for everything. He lives in London now. Alistair is in Geneva. He does not call. I am all alone in that big house. Katerina, it is so quiet." I said nothing. I felt a pang of pity, but it was distant, like watching a tragedy on television. "I just wanted to see him," Beatrice said, her voice breaking. "I saw the magazine. I hired a private detective to find where you were living. I need to know that there is a future. Please, can I hold him? Just for a moment?" She took a step forward, reaching out a hand. Her fingers were bony, covered in liver spots and diamonds that no longer sparkled because the hand that wore them was shaking too much. Leo looked up. He saw the strange woman. He did not smile. He simply stared at her with the solemn curiosity of a baby. I placed my hand gently on Leo's chest. Creating a barrier, Beatrice froze. I looked her in the eye. I did not scream. I did not list her crimes. I did not need to reminding her of the medical records she forged, or the mistress she hired. We both knew the ledger. "You can look," I said softly. Beatrice waited, hope flickering in her eyes. "But you cannot touch," I finished. The hope died instantly, extinguished like a candle in a storm. "Katerina, please," she begged. "He is my blood. He is my grandson." "He is a human being," I said. "And you forfeited the right to know him when you decided that a legacy was more important than a life. You chose the company. Beatrice, you chose the image. You chose to treat his mother like a broodmare to be discarded." "I am sorry," she wept, the tears finally spilling over and tracking through her heavy makeup. "I am so sorry. I have lost everything." "I know," I said, "and I am sorry for your loss. But you cannot find what you lost here. This boy is not a replacement for your empire. He is not a fix for your loneliness. He is free." Beatrice stood there for a long time, weeping silently. She looked at Leo one last time, devouring his image, memorizing the curve of his cheek and the dark tuft of his hair. She knew, with absolute certainty, that this was the closest she would ever get. "He is beautiful," she whispered. "Yes," I said. "He is." Beatrice nodded slowly. She wiped her face with a lace handkerchief. She looked at me, and in her eyes, I saw something I had never seen before. Respect and fear. "Goodbye, Katerina," she said. "Goodbye, Beatrice." She turned around. The walk back to the car seemed even longer than the walk to us. She looked small, a shrinking figure against the vastness of the landscape. She was a relic of a bygone era, a monument to a kind of ambition that ate its own children. I watched the driver open the door for her. I watched the black car pull away, kicking up a small cloud of dust that quickly settled. The silence returned, but it was lighter now. I looked down at Leo. He had found a pine cone and was trying to offer it to me. I picked him up and held him close, inhaling the scent of baby shampoo and sunshine, for so long. I had thought that my revenge would be the destruction of the Sterlings. I thought that seeing them ruined, seeing them lose their money and their status, would be the thing that healed me. And yes, there was justice in that. But as I watched Beatrice drive away, leaving me alone in my paradise, I realized the truth. My revenge was not the video. The video was just survival. The video was the knife I used to cut the ropes. My revenge was this. It was the peace in my chest. It was the weight of my son in my arms. It was the fact that I could wake up in the morning and not feel afraid. My revenge was my happiness. My revenge was that I did not need them. I had built a life so full, so vibrant, and so real that they could not even touch it. "Hey!" I turned around. Walking down the trail from the parking lot were Samantha and Lucas. Samantha was carrying a massive basket of food, and Lucas was carrying a cooler and a kite. "Sorry we are late," Samantha called out. Lucas insisted on stopping for the good cheese. "It is Gruyere," Lucas shouted, grinning. "You cannot have a picnic without Gruyere." They waved at me. My real family, the people who had stood by me in the fire. I stood up, hoisting Leo onto my hip. He kicked his legs, excited to see his Auntie Sam. "We are over here," I called back. I started to walk toward them. The grass was soft under my feet. The ocean roared its approval. The sun was high and bright, casting no shadows, only light. I walked toward the people I loved, leaving the empty road behind me. I once thought my life ended when the screen went black in that ballroom. I was wrong. That was the moment the lights finally came on. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. Please leave a comment below sharing your location and your thoughts on Katarina's journey. And let's connect. If you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to the Sweet Rose Drama channel, like this video, and hit the hype button to help this story reach even more listeners. Your support means the world.